the fact of the matter is that the Taliban on the ground, they control more than 70% parts of Afghanistan. And this is a BBC report which is based on more than 1,200 eyewitness accounts. The Taliban are either controlling or contesting 70% region of Afghanistan. And now Americans basically, they try every conceivable method to use firepower. Short of using nuclear weapons, they used every weapon. And when Trump came, he threatened Pakistan, you will face the consequences. And then he later on realized that things are not going to work this way. And then he formally made a request to Pakistan to help Americans to facilitate the peace talks. Now, the fact that these negotiations have been happening for the last couple of years, you may recall that the head of the Afghan Taliban was assassinated. I'm using the word of assassinated because of the fact that it happened at a time when there was a peace talks between Taliban and the Americans happening in Pakistan, and there were at that particular point of time indications that the then Taliban might talk directly to the Afghan government. After the assassination of their leader, then they decided once for all that now the talks with Americans would be entirely on our terms and conditions. And when these talks started with the Americans, then I think Talibans were very clear-headed. They said, you are talking to us because you stand defeated in the battlefield. You have lost all the options. I am privy of some of the information, and Zalmay Khalilzad wanted that we want to retain some military bases in Afghanistan. The answer came, okay, you can retain, but then give us permission also to have a military base near Washington. So if it is acceptable, let's have a deal. The point I'm trying to make is that the Afghan Taliban have been very defined, and they know it is a result of their battlefield, because of which the Americans are negotiating with them. So, you know,
right.
what...
But the bigger question is, let's say Taliban and the US, they have been negotiating, but the bigger question is of peace in Afghanistan. And we see that 2019 and 18 have seen the highest, I would say, incidents of violence in Afghanistan. For a layman, Afghanistan is not secure. Let it be targeted by the Taliban, by the government forces, non-government forces. The government has also been, targeting some of the civilians as well, collateral damage for that matter. US forces have been targeting somehow. The civilians have been, dying in Afghanistan. What is, let's say, would there be any end to this violence in Afghanistan at the moment? Do you see that happening in future anytime soon?
I don't foresee an end to the violence. Also, right now, there are landmines on which the government in Kabul is sitting on. And those landmines are the election results. Whenever the election result, the presidential election results is announced, that means there is going to be maybe a mini civil war between two groups. The one represented by Abdullah and the other President Ashraf Ghani. So Americans don't want that these election results should be announced. They want this deal to happen. And after that, I think probably they will come up with a solution where these elections are going to become altogether irrelevant. Taliban's in most foreseeable scenario, of course, they are not going to go for a ceasefire with the Americans. There will be a deal which was already finalized.
Right.
I think that deal is likely to be announced sooner or later. It is simply a matter of time. And then Taliban are going to suggest that, okay, we are going to talk with the government in Kabul, but in their unofficial capacity, they can talk to us along with other ethnic and political groups.
Yes. Right.
And I think they are going to glue themselves with that stance, and that is extremely important. And if you look at just the last point I want to make, the very core of the peace deal which was finalized is simply that the Taliban had given Americans assurance that the Al-Qaeda or any other group would not attack American interest and their allies' interest.
Well, this is interesting.
And that option was available with Americans after 9/11. There were similar options. So they have got nothing.
Interestingly,
There are two actors in the peace talks. The other actors they are shadowed actors. They have been projected by the media and as somebody who matters. They don't matter in Afghan politics. It is, you may recall, before 9/11, Taliban were controlling much of Afghanistan. There was not a kind of a civil war which was there after 90s. And then there was Ahmad Shah Massoud, a very brave soldier, a brave general, who had given tough time to the Taliban. He's no longer there. So ethnic groups which were strong previously, they are very weak now. They exist on Afghan land symbolically. And now, in the Northern Alliance, which used to be supported by Iran, the situation has changed. Now, Iran is supporting Taliban. So, if the day Americans leave Afghanistan, we can expect that it will be a matter of weeks. The Taliban will take over the entire Afghanistan. We have to see the situation on ground. There are, on paper, there are 350,000 Afghan National Army. Every year, 50,000 are deserting, which means almost 20% of the entire army. And then Taliban have their moles in sight. There have been so many attacks. More than 150 American soldiers were killed, none other than by the Afghan troops, which are believed to be the moles of Afghan Taliban. So the greater possibility is that the Taliban are going to announce general amnesty for all Afghan militant groups. They would join hands with Afghan Taliban. They will switch over their loyalties. That is a foreseeable.
But my question is, would it be that smooth that US would be withdrawing troops and handing over Afghanistan to Taliban, and the regional countries would be watching Afghanistan going to the Taliban?
Going by what has been negotiated previously, at the heart of the problem of negotiation between two parties was that when Americans are going to leave. Now, they're already going to withdraw 8,000 troops, which means 6 to 7,000. Now, the negotiations are going to be on 6 and 7,000 troops withdrawal. And there is going to be a timeline. Is it going to happen in a matter of one month?
And also,
And I think once that happens, the situation is going to heavily turn in favor of Afghan Taliban. We have been underestimating them. They have a parallel judicial system in Afghanistan.